Hello, I'm Polly Samuel, and I'm also known as Donna Williams. And I was going to talk a bit about death. So, every one of us has certain feelings about life, about death, about purpose, if you like, or or the why am I here, or all that kind of stuff. Who am I? Blah, 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 blah. And I think that for me, the ideas about death are married to ideas about life, and that they are, they're continuations, if you like, of the same thing. For example, the death of an interest leaves space for the birth of another interest. The death of an occupation leaves space to develop another one. The death of a friendship, the ending of a friendship, hopefully leaves a gap for more time and energy that can be dedicated to other things, other connections, perhaps new friendships. Um, the death um, of a skill, of a function. Um, for example, sometimes when we're born, with something offline or not working. Um, so something like being significantly meaning deaf, a severe language processing disorder might mean that you develop the ability to hear everything musically and you become a musician. So, or the ability to, inability to see things as a whole, to process anything as a whole, might mean that you learn to see through your hands and become a sculptor. Um, so the death of things tends to be connected with all the other things that rebalance that, and I guess loss. When we think about loss and we lose people, we can we can see this um, as ultimately a change in our lives. Hopefully, we don't just see it as an opportunity, although many a psychopath probably has. But I think sometimes we're so consumed with grief that we can't turn the corner. Not that we can or even need to put grief behind us. I think we can walk along beside grief, and instead of feeling only loss, we can find a greater enrichment from all the connection that we had with somebody and all that it made us into, and all that it taught us, and all that we have cherished. And it becomes like, I think, a church of the soul, a place that we can visit. And it's not the same as seeing this person in their physical life or hearing their voice again or visiting their smells, but in a way, it becomes even more sacred because it's kind of like less is more. When the person is alive, we have more, 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 more. When they're dying, we understand that less is more. When they're dead, we if you've been really close to the person who's gone, if they really affected your life and really changed you, they become something quite sacred. And those memories, that place, that connection is a sacred thing. And the feelings of loss are part of, or can be part of, that sacredness. And I experienced a lot of things that took me to this. In my first 4.5 years, of course, when you're little, whether somebody dies or whether you lose them amounts to the same thing. To you, they died. You lost them. They left. They were gone. It was a death, an ending. And as a child, my way of handling that was to take all they were into my own world. And really, when we're children, this is what we do. When we become connected with someone and we're in this this dialogue, this communication with the beingness of that other person. Um, we are taking those patterns, that feeling, that energy, if you like, into our own world. And then if we lose them, and it might be that, I lost one of the first, I had some people I was very close to in my first 4.5 years. One was the person who ran a care centre that I was at from 6 months to 2.5 years. And then suddenly I wasn't there. There was no goodbye. There was no trailing off. It was goodbye. It wasn't, it was they were gone. And my carer obviously considered it relatively insignificant, but to me it was hugely significant. I was married, loyally married to the environment there. I was loyally married to the patterning. I was loyally married to the tones and the smells and the sounds, and all of the objects, the feel of fabrics and layout and all the sensory aspects of it. I was married to it, and suddenly that marriage was destroyed, taken, removed, void, dead, gone in the physical life. And so then there was only one way to deal with that, and that was to carry it with me. And then I was also very attached to the Italian carer at the end of our street. It was a very small street, dead-end street. And I'd been left with this Italian lady from 6 months old. I heard from her later that my mother would push the pram through the gate and leave it there. And this lady explained to me, once I was an adult, that she didn't know what to do because she didn't speak any English. She couldn't argue her case. She couldn't do anything about it, so she looked after me. And I remembered this lady and her dancing and her voice and her language and singing away and being present when she did her cooking and being fed little bits of what she was cooking and being in the garden with her as she was doing her, tending to her vegetables. And then when she had a little girl bouncing the bassinet and hearing this experience of being around this baby and watching her caring about it, and I was part of this. So to me, I was married to this, and it was a really nice music. I'm a musician, and I felt in a way, I'm kind of like an instrument that's playing with the other instruments, and we're in this band, and this is the experience. And so it's a really nice flow and marriage to this atmosphere and these people. And then, of course, when I was about 3.5, 4, this woman understood that I'm not her child, and she may have had a confrontation with the person who had originally been abandoning me to her. But nevertheless, I remember this lady crying and pulling the blind and on her kitchen door, and I was to be abandoned and unable to connect anymore with her. I was being weaned, if you like, and then I started being shooed out from the garden by her oldest son. So it was an incredible loss. It was being removed from somebody, being pulled away, being weaned. It was hard, and it was like a death. And so I mourned her hugely. But I took a lot of this into my own heart, into my own world, and kept it alive, kept it sacred. And so for me, these losses, these endings enriched me, and they made my world fuller. And the fuller my world was, the less I necessarily needed to cling or hold on to things in the external world, and which is sort of good. I mean, you can take it too far. And as a person with autism, yeah, I took it very, very far, too far. But it's also got a good side to it, which is a very spiritual side to it, and healthy, comparatively healthy. And I was very close to my father, and he was a wild maniac, really. He was a wild, crazy guy. He happened to be, quite criminal, and he was developmentally odd, probably. He was definitely, dyslexic and would have fitted the ADHD thing and was a bit naughty, and probably being the child of a mother who was a dipso and a bit naughty, he probably had FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and so he was developmentally odd and wackadoo, but he was like Willy Wonka from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory when Gene Wilder did it. He was magical and crazy and like something from a cartoon. And so he was musical and he did characterizations and everything was gesture, and he was like a kids' TV show constantly. But when I was about 3 years old, 3.5, my mother, who was yeah, she basically, he wasn't to talk to me, he wasn't to look at me, he wasn't have any contact with me, and again it was that complete loss, and what do you do with it? And so what I did with that loss was I I allowed myself to be enriched by it, to not lose it, by integrating it into my own world and making it part of my world, part of myself, or a compartmentalized part of myself. But nevertheless, it became like another little church within my soul, if you like. So then, when I was very close to my grandparents, and they lived in the shed in our backyard, and they lived there until I was 4.5 years old. But they lived with us before I was born, and in my first 3 months, I slept with my grandmother. So it's her smell, her movements, the feel of her skin, the chuckle of her laugh, the sounds of her voice, the fabrics of her clothes, uh, the patterns of her behavior that are all imprinted on me. And the feeling of sharing coloured tinfoil with her, and little bits of wool, and hearing her playing music, and the grandfather who would get on the floor and make little hanky creatures, little puppets, and with the hanky, and make reflections on the wall with the mirror, and I'd go and jump and catch the light, and playing with little magnets. And it was an atmosphere, it was a world, and it was full of the music of these people individually and as a couple. It was the feel of this world, of this shed that contained the souls of these people, and they lived in this little a garage at the back. It didn't have any windows. It had a little vent window, and it was very impoverished, but it was totally rich. It was rich with life and connection. And one day when I was 4.5 and I went out there, and the grandfather was purple and cold and he had died, the grandmother was sent away the same week, and I lost both of them. So I saw the grandmother another 4 times over the next 2 years, and then she was also gone. So I had no capacity to do anything else with this. Remember, also, I was an autistic person, so I didn't have functional speech. I was echolalic. And so I couldn't discuss this. I couldn't express this verbally, except to do their voices and their movements and keep them alive and replay them. And so it was natural to me to take these people into myself and keep them within my world. And so where this leaves me with this thing about loss and the death of relationships, the death of things, the endings of things, is that I have always felt that with them can be the most crippling grief and loss. And for a long time, I froze with the level of sadness, and I kept this very sacred, so I wouldn't let the world interact with this part of me, this very connected part of me. And I did eventually feel okay about letting the grief go, and celebrating these people much more openly. And but this has also a bearing on my feelings about death now. So it shaped me very dramatically. Um, I when I was close to my cousin, and she was in her 70s, and we would see her about once a month. My husband and I would see her about once a month at a dinner club, and she would drop round to our house. And I saw her for about 10 years, and so she was one of the gang. She felt like a cousin, like a pal, and then in her last 3 months of her life, she was living at a care home around the corner, and although she had Parkinson's, it never occurred to me that she would suddenly ever just leave. And I thought, well, yeah, sure, you've got Parkinson's and it's pretty bad and it's eating you up and it's taking away all your functions. But nevertheless, I still kept seeing her as being at home in there. And even towards the end, I mean, she had lost all capacity to walk, or capacity to self-toilet, or capacity to do her own, wash herself or dress herself. Without her medication, she would commonly lose the capacity to have audible, comprehensible speech. Sometimes she would lose the ability to swallow. She lost most of the ability of her hands. She lost the ability to keep herself upright and was falling out of the wheelchair. But for me, I would always still see her. I would see her in her eyes. I would see her in her cheekiness. I would see her in her tone. And I still kept seeing her there. And so I didn't really notice how much of all these things, was I losing her? And my husband and I would go and we'd take her out, and she'd say, I can't drink, and we'd say, that's okay, when we make her straws and extensions of straws and make it possible for her to drink. Oh, I can't eat, and, okay, we'll get everything blended up so you can drink it. And, I can't keep myself upright. I go, it's okay, we'll straighten you up when you're melting over the side too much. And everything was, well, we can work with this because you're still here. You're still in there, And so one day we went to see her, and it was 8 o'clock, and it was a Sunday, and we sat with her, and she said something about death. I said, well, I thought you were scared of death. And she said, not now. And I said, why? And she said, Parkinson's. And I said, so you're more scared of the Parkinson's than you are of death now? And she said, yeah. So it was the next day, about 10 a.m., and I got a call from her son, and he told me that she died. So I went up there, and I just sat with her. Obviously, she'd left her body; she had stopped breathing, and just sat with her, and celebrated who she was in myself, and what my husband and I had the privilege of spending time with this friend, with this cousin, this pal, this neighbour, because she lived, around the corner from us. And then, of course, after she was gone, we started walking around the block, and we would go past where she was, and we would feel sadness, and we would feel the loss. But we didn't confuse the loss with the gift of, I guess, the nostalgia and the memories of the fun times that we'd had in the 3 months, and certainly in her time in the 10 years before she had Parkinson's. And this was a very, it was a very interesting thing for me to, she had died from, her brain had just stopped keeping her breathing. And as an adult, as a child, I had autonomic issues. And so these are the functions that happen normally in the body that the brain is meant to just do without thinking. And one of them is breathing. And so I would have episodes where, my brain would just forget how to keep breathing. And I'd get a bit dizzy, and then I would apply myself to try and remember to breathe. And it would last for about 15 minutes, and then it would go, and I'd be okay. And I didn't care about it, didn't think much of it, and sometimes the episodes would be a pain in the neck, and I could get several in a row, or I'd get a couple during the day, and I would think, what is this? It's driving me crazy. And I didn't see other people getting agitated in the same way about this, so I thought, they're not experiencing the same. And then when I was in my teens and I could ask questions, because I got functional speech by 9 to 11, I said, well, why do other people's brains keep them breathing and mine keeps forgetting? And they didn't understand what I was saying. So I was about 45, 46, and I woke up and I found that I had no respiratory drive. This meant that it was like when you're underwater and there's no breathing. It's not like you're holding your breath. You're not holding your breath. You just, or maybe if you don't have this issue, you didn't have that, because I could swim the length of the Olympic pool on the bottom of the pool. I could stay underwater for a long time, and I would get dizzy, and I'd laugh my head off like as if I had drugs. But I think this was because I had a failed or poor respiratory drive, and I drowned twice, or I had near drowning twice before I was 3, because I just didn't come up. I just sat on the bottom because I didn't have this anxiety or natural need to take a breath. And so by now I was failing, and it was a couple of years later, once I had gone through, I'd dealt with breast cancer, I'd been through chemo, and my husband said, it's really scary. You are simply not breathing. And many people will have obstructive apnea where, their throat closes or collapses and they fight for air and go, and then they wake up. Well, a failed respiratory drive doesn't do any of that. You just go, and hopefully, eventually, it comes in and you just breathe a little bit, and then maybe it stops again. And then it might come in a little bit, and you wake up and your hands are numb, your mouth's numb, your feet are numb, and you go, what is that? So they diagnosed it. Eventually I got put onto a machine that does my breathing. So it pushes air in, but it backs off, which encourages me to also let air out in the absence of the natural instinct that would do those things. And of course, there's 2 things that keep us alive. One is your heart continues to beat. It knows how to do it. It knows how to keep it regular. And the other one is that you can trust that your brain will keep you breathing and that your heart simply won't stop. And I had lost that trust over the second one. I had to trust a machine. And so this machine is the only thing between you and death. And at first I didn't take this seriously, not terribly seriously. And then a couple of years ago, after being on this machine a few years, I fell asleep for about 2 minutes while I was waiting for my husband to brush his teeth. And I hadn't put the machine on. So obviously once I was asleep, I wasn't breathing. And then what happened was I felt this feeling that was like a vacuum cleaner. I could feel there was a vibration that was going on, as if someone had something that was vibrating here, going, and this feeling woke me, and I realized that my heart was not beating, it was vibrating. And I straight away went to put the mask on, and it went into tachycardia. So it went from into boom, 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 and it regulated itself. And I thought, what the hell was that? You know, something really crazy. What was that? So I spoke to the doctor, the GP, and I said, what was that? And he said, well, your heart went into atrial fibrillation. I said, well, what is that? He said, well, it means that your heart lost its rhythm and it was vibrating. And I said, well, what would happen if it didn't start getting its rhythm back? He said, well, eventually it'll just stop. He said, well, what happens if it just stops? He said, well, then you basically die. I said, he said, you get lack of oxygen to your brain, your blood's not pumping around, and so forth, and you get brain dead. And I think that was when I really understood, whoa. And after this, I understood that every single day I'm in the really weird position that I get to make the choice. Do I feel like being alive today or not? And I know that if I decided that I don't want to be alive, I don't have to wait for the law to pass voluntary euthanasia. I don't have to wait for some disease to help me slowly die, like cancer coming back or something. I don't have to wait for any of that. All I got to do is go and fall asleep without my machine, or if I really want to make sure, I just go and pour myself some, a jug of warm sake and go. See you later. And this was so bizarre to me that any human being has such a level of choice, choice to live. And I think it's so interesting for me. Spiritually, we have this question: oh, am I glad I'm alive? What is life? Why am I here? I'm here because I failed to die. I'm here because I am making a choice to ensure every day that I don't. And I could decide every day that I'm going to walk in front of a bus. And it was a while ago. It's pretty crazy. I went to walk my husband to the train station. The woman with like piddly impaired immunity, who's a breast cancer patient, a failed respiratory drive. I also have like a collagen disorder that it's called EDS4, and it comes with organ rupture and crap like that. And a lot of them, statistically, 90% are dead by the age of 40. So I've got a lot of reasons why I could be dead. I could be dead. I could be dead. I'm from a background of suffocation abuse in early childhood at the hands of a mentally ill parent. The whole thing of I could die. I was being given gin and Valium until I was 4 years old by this crazy person, and I could die, and so I don't have any of this fear, this thing of I'm going to kill you, I'm going to hit you until you're unconscious. It's like, yes, well, yada yada, you've done it too many times, and I'm kind of over it now because I'm not my body. I am not my mind, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my body. I am this beingness that as long as any of these things are still alive, I have an impact on my world and on the people who love me and on my cats, and that is where I am. That's my aliveness. Even if I'm not here, even if I go to sleep without all this stuff and my heart goes into atrial fibrillation and I don't wake up, guess what? I'm still here. I walk around then within all the people who knew me and loved me. So how do I die? I don't die. My possessiveness of my physical existence, that might be gone. I don't get that opportunity. I don't get that, that conscious, that chance to wake up, continually wake up day after day, year after year, and say, oh, I'm alive. I mean, that's gone. So anyway, here I was walking to the train station and I got all these health doodahs going on that could say, hey, guess what? You might die. It's like, yeah, yada, yada. So I got to the point, I go, yeah, yada, yada. And I went to the train station and said goodbye to my husband, and he's gone and caught the train, and I come back out. And there's a little area at the corner there with a big bush and a big recycling bin. And I just go there, and the man across the other side of the lights is saying, okay, green light, come on everybody. And I'm not at the set of lights yet. But for some reason, I start walking as if I'm at the set of lights just over here. And I have my leg out and I'm about to step off the curb, and something in me must have heard something or whatever, and I just look for a moment, and a bus came like about, I don't know, it was 30 centimeters off my leg by the time I took my leg back. And this thing of, I should have been shocked, I should have been scared, I should have been upset, I should have had some grand epiphany or something, but I didn't. I just thought, oh yeah, sometimes we live, sometimes we die. And I crossed over to the lights, and I went past the man at the lights, the lollipop man, and I said, wow, that would have been a short day. And that was that. So I think that we often take life and death so immensely personally, so immensely seriously. And what is really important is not, oh, I really need to be alive, I really need to have this body, I really need to have my mind, I really need to be able to have all these feelings. I don't think that, for me, that is that important. I think whilst I have these, I really need to live life to the full. Because when I do, yes, I'm an experience machine. I'm this biological walking experience machine that gets to enjoy it all, enjoy the amusement park. That's great. And I'm an artist, a painter, a sculptor, a musician, a writer. I've been a performer and a poet. I'm a teacher. I teach languages. I've traveled. I'm a public speaker. I am an experience machine, and I not only love the enrichment of all those things, but then I love the flow of that and the sharing of that with my students, with people that I've mentored. I mean, I love life and I live life, but I'm not possessive of life. And sure, maybe it would be different if I had children, if I was worried about such and so and whatever. And oh, poor me, all I have is my cats and my husband and some good friends or whatever. And I love them and I adore them, but I don't think all I have, because I'm going to live on in all of them. So what is, yes, I might have, but to me, that's just one part of it. Uh, I, yeah, I feel that this has been, that the perspective and the journey to that perspective has been such a gift, a really wonderful gift, because I, I know that I am alive by choice. And I know that every day I get to make that choice. And I grew up with someone who, by my late childhood, after all of the loss and having the entrapment with someone who is very unwell, and being their scapegoat, being their object, being their target, being their victim, I wished in late childhood that I was dead. I desperately wished that something would just kill me, and nothing did. And I, um, yeah, I now look and I say, then I kind of held my breath. One day I'll get out of here. One day I'll be safe. And I did. I got out of there. And it took a long time to get my life safe. For a long time, I made my own life terribly unsafe, because I learned that life and death, it was, how relevant was it? If somebody tries to kill you over and over, eventually you don't take it seriously. And there's good side to that, but there's bad side to that. And the bad side was I was a person who did not take being alive very seriously. And I didn't care if, I was very endangering. I walk in front of cars. I would run along the train tracks. I didn't, when it came to substances, I didn't care. Like a wild, crazy, homeless teenager with nothing significantly to live for, and no real family, no belonging in a family to remind me why I should stay alive. But I came through that, and I learned to really value my life. But I'm really glad that I learned that even if I value it, I shouldn't too much value it. Because if I too much value it, what happens when it's obvious that I cannot guarantee it? And I can't guarantee that the people I love and I'm connected to will be there forever, that I'll be able to hold them, contain them, possess them. I don't, would I want to? Um, I love that less is more. I love that if I have lost, better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. And better to have lived and lost than never to have lived at all, whichever way you want to put it. And I also say, we curse those who have broke our hearts until we learned they were the ones who taught we had them. And so loss has given me so much, and the death of things has given me so much. And I also feel that one day I may again have immense loss, and I will survive it, and I will keep sacred the attachment and connection with the person that I had loved and lost. And I will know and celebrate that at least in my own world, I have not fully lost them and never can until I leave my body, and then they cannot fully lose, people I left behind cannot fully lose me either. My husband was a snorer for a long time, years and years. And he found that when he uses some fix, here, it stops him snoring. And I don't know why, but it's worked for 10 years. And my grandmother used to wear a piece of camphor in a little bag on a pin around her neck. And when he puts this, I smell my grandmother. And is she not those smells? I have a crocheted rug that belonged to my grandmother. And I remember enmeshing my fingers into this crocheted stuff that she would have. Is that feeling not the essence of my grandmother? For she had knitted these things, put herself into them, she wore them. They were associated with the sounds of her and the movements of her and the presence of her and her enjoyment of my life and her acceptance and physicality with me. And the world will never be completely empty of all of the associations that bring these people back to life. And the world will never be fully empty of all of the associations that bring me back to life for all the people who love me. And or all the people who've hated me. I mean, are some people not as invested in those that they detest as those that they love? I like to perhaps accept that, because when you have somebody who is an attachment disordered parent, like my mother was, I know that no amount of saying it or wishing it will ever bring to her what the kinds of attachment, healthy attachment that I've known. And at the same time, I know that she is very, very invested in what has been a real a nemesis relationship, and that this, for someone in her situation, is perhaps as valid as perhaps as valid a connection as she's going to know, with me at least. And who am I to say that that's not nevertheless a connection? Yeah, but I guess this thing of the lived life, when we live our life, it's there for us to experience, enjoy, accumulate, change, sculpt, become aware of and familiar with, to be able to conceptualize, be able to express, be able to be quiet with. But it's also there for us to be able to make connections with the lived lives in others, and to hold sacred our experience of their connection with us. Okay, that's it.